Howdy, folks. I'm Buck the Democracy Dog, and welcome to Buck's Diner. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's talk about democracy. And if you enjoy today's show, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. Food. More specifically, what happens when people aren't sure they'll have enough of it? It's called food insecurity. And it might not look the way you think it does. When we hear about hunger, we might picture someone who hasn't eaten for several days. That certainly happens. But food insecurity is broader than that. It means not having reliable access to enough affordable, nutritious food. Someone experiencing food insecurity might have food in the refrigerator today, but not know whether they can afford groceries next week. A parent might eat less so their children can eat more. A senior might have to balance the grocery bill against medicine, utilities, or housing. Someone might have plenty of inexpensive food available, but not enough nutritious food. And sometimes food insecurity happens to people who never imagined it could happen to them. My dad knows something about that. There was a time when he had a home, a career, and enough money to buy groceries without thinking very much about it. Then his circumstances changed. Eventually, he found himself homeless. Today, he lives in a small travel trailer with me, and I'm pretty happy about that part. It's cozy. There are treats. And I have a pretty good yard. But Dad's income is limited. So today, part of his food budget comes from SNAP. And sometimes we visit local food banks. That experience has taught him something important. Having something to eat isn't necessarily the same thing as being food secure. At a food bank, you don't walk through the aisles with a shopping cart and choose everything you'd normally buy at the grocery store. You work with what's available. Sometimes there's meat. Sometimes there isn't very much. Sometimes there are vegetables. Sometimes there are boxes and cans of things you wouldn't normally choose, and you're grateful for what you receive. But gratitude doesn't mean the system couldn't be better. There's another part of food insecurity that doesn't get discussed enough. Dignity. People shouldn't have to feel ashamed because they need help buying food. Children shouldn't have to worry about whether their classmates know they're receiving a free lunch. A senior shouldn't feel like they've failed because their social security check doesn't stretch far enough. So how do we solve food insecurity? Well, there's probably not one single answer. Programs like SNAP and WIC help people purchase food. School breakfast and lunch programs make sure children can eat while they're learning. Food banks and community organizations can provide help when someone's resources aren't enough. Those programs matter. But we should also ask why people need emergency food assistance in the first place. If someone works full-time and still can't afford groceries, maybe we should talk about wages. If a senior worked their entire life and still has to choose between food and other necessities, maybe we should talk about Social Security. If someone's rent takes most of their income, maybe food isn't the only affordability problem they have. And if medical bills or prescription costs are consuming the money someone would otherwise spend on groceries, then healthcare policy becomes food policy too. Food insecurity doesn't exist by itself. It's connected to housing, healthcare, wages, education, transportation, and income. That's why simply handing someone a box of food can help them today, but may not solve the reason they needed that box in the first place. Now, whenever someone proposes doing more to help people, there's a question that almost always comes up. How much is that going to cost? That's a fair question. Government programs aren't free. Somebody has to pay for them. But there's another question we should ask just as seriously. How much does doing nothing cost? What happens when a child doesn't get enough nutritious food? Can they concentrate as well in school? What happens when someone's diet contributes to poor health? What happens when illness causes someone to miss work? What happens when preventable health problems eventually require expensive medical care? Suddenly, doing nothing doesn't look quite so free. Sometimes spending money preventing a problem can cost less than dealing with the consequences later. And maybe there's an even simpler question. What kind of country do we want to be? America is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. We produce an extraordinary amount of food. We have farmers, grocery stores, restaurants, charities, community organizations, and government programs all working on different pieces of this problem. So perhaps the question isn't whether we have enough food. Perhaps the question is whether we've built a system that makes sure people can reliably get the food they need. And solving that doesn't necessarily mean everyone will agree on the same policy. Democrats might have one solution. Republicans might have another. Democratic socialists might propose something different again. That's okay. Remember what we've talked about in our previous conversations? Democracy doesn't require everyone to agree. It requires us to recognize a problem, listen to one another, look at the evidence, and work together to find solutions. Because food insecurity isn't a Democratic problem. It isn't a Republican problem. It's a human problem. My dad never expected that someday he'd use SNAP or visit food banks. Most people probably don't. Life changes. Jobs disappear. People get sick. Housing disappears. Prices rise. Families change. And sometimes people need help getting back on their feet. That's one of the reasons we build communities in the first place. I'm just a dog, and I'll admit, I'm pretty enthusiastic about food. But I know that when there's food in my bowl, I don't have to wonder whether I deserve it. Maybe humans shouldn't have to wonder either. I'll see you next time. Actually, is anybody going to eat that? In one of the richest countries in the world, nobody should have to wonder where their next meal is coming from.